Welcome to this week's episode of Wide Angle. In India, with the largest growing number of internet users every day, the digital space is something that's in the news on a regular basis. Demonetization led to talk about digital economies, digital transactions. Aadhaar leads to debates on digital security and what happens to the data that we put in to these systems. But it's actually even more basic than that. Our information, that is our preferences, our likes, our usage of the internet is something that is being logged and stored on a daily basis by big tech companies. Sometimes we don't even know about it. When we click a like on Twitter or Facebook, when we look for a hotel on TripAdvisor, a restaurant on Zomato, these bits of information are being stored and used by companies, monetized by those companies, not by the end user. But all this is going into a space that we can't control. In order for the users to try and control some of the places where this information is being used and stored, tech companies are looking at something called blockchain technology. Now, if that's jargon to you as it is to me, we have with us Kavita Gupta, who is leading a venture capital fund that's looking to fund blockchain technologies. ConsenSys is also creating some of these technologies as well as contributing to research in this space. And of course, Anuj, Srivas of The Wire, whose articles you have been reading as you help us decode what this means for our security and our data. Kavita, first to you. You know, this is my comprehension of blockchain, a chain of blocks of information that I put out into the internet. Is this a correct way to define it? How would you make it simpler?
I think this is the most simplest way to define it, and I would absolutely, for the visual purposes, would say think of every time we go on Facebook, the example you took, right, and we put a like, there is some sort of a data server somewhere which takes that as my behavioral data, that these are the type of things I like. I like cats, I like dogs, I like shopping this, I'm checking out, oh, maybe I'm in Delhi right now because I'm trying to find restaurants on Zomato in Delhi, and the chain is anyways connected at internet, but there are few players who have access to different sector of that data or different segment of that data. What happens with blockchain is all that stuff is on one block, and then if Google has one block, Facebook has one block, Twitter has one block, 5 other places, Snapchat has one block, you as an individual can connect your chain to all of them. So the main thing is, yes, it's decentralized blocks, but you as an owner of that information data has the chain to connect all of them together.
Very often when you hear of blockchain technology, the first impression or the first association people make is with cryptocurrency and digital transactions. You know, Bitcoin in the blockchain space. I'm just throwing all this out there because it's what I keep reading and hearing as well. But it's about much more than a transaction ledger with a digitally secured signature. It's about much more than trading in cryptocurrency.
So you actually picked up on exactly a question which I get way more as soon as I say blockchain than anything about the technology. So Anuj would also agree with me. Like the first time I told my family I'm basically doing this blockchain fund and everything, they're like, oh, you're going to have cloud money somewhere. So we're going to have some untaxed money sorted somewhere. No, that's not the scenario, fortunately or unfortunately. The whole concept started with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is also based on blockchain. Now, but Bitcoin is a currency. It was always structured as a transactional platform on blockchain so that you have a secure transaction, but always with a currency trading. When Ethereum came in 2014, it was always a platform. Ethereum said, blockchain is amazing, but you are not able to actually go and exploit the potential of blockchain. With Bitcoin, you cannot code, you cannot create applications, and blockchain is way bigger than just a transactional platform. So that's when Ethereum came. And Ethereum was always a platform to create a secure transaction of data, irrespective of the sector you are using. It could be financial transaction, it could be health data, it could be educational data, it could be your identity records, anything. So, but they also realize that if they don't put a way for people to, a transactional way to use that data, there are going to be viruses which are going to create infinite loops and use up the whole database or the or what we say is a storage system. So they created the concept known as gas money, which is like, hey, if you want to use our service for this, you pay this small amount of money, and that is Ether.
Right.
So Ether was never supposed to be an individual speculative currency. It was supposed to be a way to use blockchain. But of course, coming from the whole Bitcoin era, there was a lot of FOMO happening in
Right.
the
Anuj, come in on this, because you know, Bitcoin is digital currency, and all of us have always associated its use with the dark net and illicit activity on the internet. Now there's talk about India trying to create its own cryptocurrencies as well. So that's something I'd like you to come in on. But I think on the larger issue of this information and our data which is being stored, these are debates that we're having in our society on a regular basis, because in the last 4 years, the kind of exponential use you've seen of data on the internet.
Yeah, that's true. So I think one of the, the biggest sort of context that you have to place with regard to blockchain technology is that India's digital economy growth has far outstripped its ways to make it safe, secure, transparent, and so on and so forth. And this has a lot to do with legislation, regulation, but also corporate behavior, user behavior, and general information security. So our growth is outstripping our safety in terms of using it. And so blockchain, for instance, is a sort of, I'd say, the problem was created by technology, but then again you use another technology to sort of
sort out the problem.
Exactly. So if you create a decentralized system, and use it only for one specific purpose. So what is happening right now in India is that in our rush to sort of digitize everything, you create a unique identifier, which is Aadhaar, for instance. And once you link that to everywhere, a person can go and, even if they don't have a smartphone or constant internet connection, they can use their biometrics to engage with the digital economy. But what some people fear, especially civil society and privacy activists fear, that this solution that we're creating to sort of rope in our unconnected is, sort of spiraling out of control. And it's being used for, as you pointed out in your introduction, you give up your data for one specific service, but then you don't often expect that next week that same data is being used, but in the hands of a different company for a different purpose. So permission, security, these are things that blockchain and the technology behind Bitcoin sort of has to offer for us, and that's why state governments, for instance, are trying to look at
so,
this.
Kavita, come in on this debate, because in India, when we talk about data on the internet, the Aadhaar debate is kind of focused around the security of our individual data, our biometrics, our financial data. Telephone companies are sending messages every day saying, link your Aadhaar with your phone number, otherwise your phone number accounts are going to be frozen. This is a constant thing. But there is a hesitation, because at the end of the day, if I'm putting my information into a blockchain and other people are then going to be asking me for my data, how can I decide what part of my data is relevant to that person and what part isn't? Because if your Aadhaar is going to link everything from your phone records to your banking records to your shopping data to, you name it, to your education, medical, everything, everyone may not be interested, or I may not want everyone to have my medical information or my financial information or my call records.
or get monetized
on it. How do I control who gets to see what?
But that is where I think blockchain very beautifully fits in, because blockchain provides this control to the user how much data and to what extent of data do they want to share. So I may still be connected to my SSN or my Aadhaar data, but then I can see that government is giving that access of my Aadhaar or my data to what other private entities, and how those private entities at the next step, this is the chain at the block where we started from, I can see the whole chain of my data block being used or being accessed by different entities and different people. At any point I feel like this, beyond this chain, this is not right and I don't want to be part of it. I can choose to basically block it off. And or if I see that this is not the right way of using my data, I can actually go and give them an ultimatum saying that I don't want it to be used like this and this is a wrong usage. Government expected you to use it this way, my medical record, my legal records or something, and you're not. Maybe insurance companies may end up using your medical records to jack up your whole premiums.
Correct.
Right? Or your car insurance companies will use some sort of a settlement on one of the accidents which has happened, but they have half the data to basically really mess up your premium out there. So you can use that. The other very important thing is the monetization of it. I'm not saying all of us, but some of us may be okay to basically get 20 to 40% back from the way Google, Facebook, or all the I would say clothing stores are using our data right now, right? And they are monetizing it absolutely and amazingly. And if I'm very happy for them to monetize it for my shopping trends, because then they actually send me better matched data which I want to use, but I still want 40% or 50% of that money to come back to me in one or the other way, because that's my data.
Right. So Anuj, on this issue of, saying or being able to identify where your information is being used and what is okay and what is not okay, do you think having that confidence for Indians right now who are involved and embroiled in this digital economy, Aadhaar debate, that would create a level of security and confidence? Because ultimately also, who would control the blockchain technology? I think those are issues as well. It's not, would it be the private sector, would it be the individual user, would it be the government? Would we be able to put this debate to rest with blockchain technology?
No, so I think, that might be a bit of an overstatement. So some problems with blockchain technology, for instance, includes the question of whether it should be a public versus closed blockchain. And so this is very important for issues of interoperability. So for instance, the problem right now is that too many entities control our data. But the question of how, suppose you do want to share your data that you share with company A and you're allowing it to share with company B, they need to be able to talk to each other, and sometimes with a closed loop blockchain, which a lot of banks in India, for instance, are doing, it's very hard for multiple entities to sort of talk and interface with one another. So that sort of issue has to be solved. In fact, multiple within the financial industry, people who I've spoken to, they've talked about whether the RBI or the NPCI should come out with a sort of open blockchain, that a template, for instance, how we have UPI and how that Beam has transformed payments, a similar thing for blockchain. But absolutely, so this is something that we need, for instance, because violations of privacy in India, they start with simple things like information security. So for instance, if every government and state department needs your Aadhaar information, you have to trust each party to keep it safe. So right now you have the Rajasthan state government or the Karnataka state government, because their information security culture is so poor, they're openly broadcasting this information to everyone else, and this is a huge problem in India. But whereas if you sort of decentralize everything and say that, okay, for health, I need a specific local solution, and that we create a database using blockchain, and only that person will be able to control it. That way you can sort of input your information, still use Aadhaar as authentication at the end stage, but create localized solutions. And so I think that's one of, I don't know how that will work.
Actually, the proof of state, which is the next stage for blockchain, does enable public and private keys and all the ecosystem, and you can switch it on and off based on the usage. So for an example, if Government of India is doing a project, they can start with the private part for whatever information which is inside the government, and then they switch on the public key on it for whatever information they feel like as soon as they share something with the private entity. So going back to the example we have been talking about, we put in our Aadhaar card, it goes into Government of India's database. As soon as that information is being shared by any of the insurance company, healthcare sector, then they put the public key on. As soon as the public key is on, for me, the way I'm looking at my blockchains is I entered my data to the government entity, it went internally from government, these are the 5 private entity which it has been shared to, and now I can see the rest of the trail.
Okay, so Anuj, you were making the point earlier that the problems of technology, the solutions also have to be found technologically in this internet space. Tell me something politically, in the climate that we're in, would a solution like this, or the presentation of a solution like this, be able to at least allay some security concerns that the public has? Because I don't think, the court's judgment is still awaited, of course, but realistically, I don't know where there will be a rollback from Aadhaar. We'll have to leave it to the courts to decide. But would this be some kind of a solution that could be projected?
Yeah. So I think, in fact, for instance, so one of the bigger concerns that both Aadhaar and blockchain are looking to address, for instance, in India, is the problem of land records, right? So it's a huge problem with a lot of scope for corruption and mafiaism in local parts of the state. And I know, for example, there is a push by the central government to link Aadhaar with land records, okay, and to make sure that they can't be duplicated. You don't have to worry about the the bureaucrat sitting in a state department who has to sign off and verify that this land record is created. But on the other hand, for instance, I know that the chief ministers of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana are also piloting blockchain solutions, but creating a decentralized database for land records. So, I mean, it's difficult to say which will win out and, for what purposes.
Yeah,
so,
but tribal lands are also in Africa. One of the biggest projects in Africa, in Kenya and Uganda, Rwanda is happening. That is by UN, is for the tribal land registry through blockchain.
So Kavita, let me come back to you, because in your presentation at the Sci-Fi conference, you also took Telangana and Andhra Pradesh as examples as states that were trying to do this at its very inception. I mean, they're new states, they're setting up new databases for their citizens, etc. And it would be a good place to begin at this time. What has been your interaction with these states, your companies or your VC funds interaction, and are you finding takers for your technology and your funding in India? I think that would be an interesting question as well.
I think I've been very surprised on one hand with respect to technology in India. It has been on the forefront. Like, we are sitting here and talking about blockchain 2 years into this technology, where the central government hasn't accepted it, or in a public market also it hasn't been used that much. We are already having a conversation. There's a whole ecosystem. Anuj was talking about blockchain Bombay, which happened, blockchain India. So there's a lot of conversation. From the state level, Andhra Pradesh government in Telangana has been learning about it. They have reached out to ConsenSys. ConsenSys has been one of their thought partners in the process. And it has been very surprising that how 2 states out of the whole country are basically leapfrogging the way it is going to be used for their citizen. And it's a very good case, which we want the whole country to take it and implement it. With respect to the entrepreneurial sector, there are a lot of research and the thought going on. I am still looking for like great companies which are at the stage to take the VC money, but I don't see that not going to happen, or I will not be able to find if I haven't yet over next 2 months or 3 months. With a group like Blockchain India to exist at so early on in this ecosystem means that there are a lot of youth, the next generation, who understands the data, the wrong and the right way of using that data, and how do they want that change to happen, are already aligning themselves with blockchain.
Right, Anuj, most of our internet behavior and our data is right now, from whatever we can judge, either in the domain of center and state governments and the banking sector that we transact digitally, or with a few really large tech companies. Would this be able to break that monopoly that these companies have? I mean, if I am able to then control my own data, will it mean that I can take on a Google or a Facebook or an Amazon or whoever? Because I mean, I don't have the bandwidth or the means to do that.
Sure. No. So it's not a one-stop panacea sort of solution in that case. For instance, because so much of your data is already
out there,
already with these companies, and it's already out there, and you can't, a user by himself can't force a Google or a Facebook, or even somewhat smaller in scale like a Flipkart or a Zomato, and though they're already very big themselves, we can't force, an individual user can't say, okay, hey, you have to start transacting with me in a different manner and the way you do it. So I think the better way to go about it is look at from a sectoral and industry specific stance. So for instance, healthcare, or and within healthcare, insurance, or with either land registration, or vehicle registration, and so on and so forth. So areas where these tech companies are trying to further invade, for instance, so Facebook's data is now being used by our income tax department to track down on tax evasion, and so on and so forth. So these are the linkages between the already burgeoning tech industry and our personal lives, where it's on a collision course right now. So possibly blockchain and other, I mean, and nowadays even blockchain, a lot of people want to go beyond that term. So they're saying DLT, decentralized ledger technology and so on and so forth. So
if I am an informative customer and I say I have the same product on Amazon and same product on this company A, but this company A is giving me my access to data and everything, we're going to see that shift over time. And that's what's going to make these older companies, these legends, to actually go back and start looking at their policy. And with Mark Zuckerberg already announcing everything about false news and taking the responsibility of how data manipulation is now a forefront issue, and with unfortunately with Vegas shooting, the first wave of news has also reinforced that momentum, that there has to be a sort of a data checkers, which has to be an automated manner, which has to be a part and parcel of how the DNA of the way we use DNA.
So Kavita, in conclusion, since you've raised two very strongly political questions for the US, I want to ask you, had blockchain technologies been sort of, widespread in the 2016 US election, for example, would we have seen the kind of manipulation that we saw?
Well, that's a very loaded
companies are being charged with.
I definitely would say that the whistle would have blown way earlier than it did, and we would have seen the sort of patterns, and those patterns would have got analyzed way earlier than the point where you have a very big action has already happened, and to move that, like to change that action now, I don't know, whatever it's going to take. But definitely it would have become a very big issue an year before than it actually happened.
So Anuj, something we should do before 2019 elections or
perhaps,
not?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're able to sort of, I mean, I wasn't quite sure where you were leading with, putting decentralized blockchain into Facebook's editorial processes, but I think there are many lessons you can take away from that and still apply, even if you don't use the core technology, some of its principles, which I think are very relevant to today's time, kind of perhaps be incorporated.
And do you think it can actually sort of move towards the WhatsApp space as well, or is this only when you're using the computer?
It is going. We already have a messenger, we already have chats, lot of chat boxes coming on. But I also want to underline something, if the audiences doesn't know, blockchain is an open source technology. It is not owned by an individual company.
So anyone can use it.
Anyone can use it. If you are a developer, you just go, you get the base, and you build up whatever you want.
And I think that's the way to go for internet democracy as well. Ultimately, put the power into the hands of the user. And I think, if this can help towards that, then great. Otherwise, I think the debates will continue. But Kavita and Anuj, thanks very much, both of you, for being on Wide Angle. That's Wide Angle this week. Thanks for watching.